There is a logical progression that goes from believing in faith, having faith that your God tells you to do something, and doing terrible deeds like suicide bombing, like flying planes into skyscrapers. Those people who do terrible things do it believing that they are righteous and good, and they think that they're doing the will of their God. So they're not evil people, they're actually good people by their own lights. They believe they're doing good things, and that's why religion is evil, because it can make you do evil things believing that they are good.
I really believe that people who go out and carry out suicide bombings, it is faith. Religion is to blame. Not geopolitics, not the world, not their lives, not what's going on around us. It's religion, plain and simple.
The evidence is plain that in many Islamic suicide bombers, you talk to them, those who fail, you talk to them afterwards, they've got paradise on the brain. They're desperate to go to a martyr's heaven.
What over 95% of all suicide terrorist attacks around the world have in common is not religion, but a specific strategic objective: to compel a democratic state to withdraw combat forces. I don't mean advisors with sidearms. I mean tanks, fighter aircraft, and armor units from territory that terrorists consider to be their homeland or prize greatly. From Lebanon to the West Bank then, and as you will see, to Iraq and Afghanistan today. Well, from 1980 to 2003, there were 343 completed suicide terrorist attacks. The world leader during this period is not an Islamic group. They're the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka. The Tamils in Sri Lanka did more suicide attacks than Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Further, at least a third of all Muslim suicide attacks are by purely secular groups, such as the PKK in Turkey. Notice over 50% are not associated with Islamic fundamentalism. What do most people think is driving suicide terrorism? Islamic fundamentalism. It doesn't hold up, ladies and gentlemen. Well, in June 1982, Hezbollah did not exist. Israel invaded southern Lebanon. 1 month later, Hezbollah was born. In May 2000, the Israeli army left Lebanon altogether. Do you know how many Hezbollah or any Lebanese suicide attacks have occurred since May 2000, when the Israeli army left southern Lebanon? 0. November 2008, that's when we signed the withdrawal accords with the Iraqi government, and we have since pulled out over 100,000 ground troops from Iraq. What's happened since we have pulled out? Suicide terrorism is dropping like Iraq, down over 85% from the peak. This research was the first to collect the complete set of the 71 individuals who actually killed themselves to carry out attacks for Osama. Of those 71, we know the names, nationality, and other socioeconomic data of 67. Not quite all, but almost all. And the largest number, 34, come from Saudi Arabia, the large majority from the Arabian Peninsula, where the United States first began to station combat forces in 1990. Yes, before 1990, the United States had a few hundred advisors there, mostly Marines with sidearms standing guard in front of an embassy, but no tanks, no fighter aircraft, no armor units, going all the way back to World War II. We put those forces in to kick Saddam out of Kuwait. We kicked him out of Kuwait in March 91 and never left. And the Al-Qaeda attacks start 5 years later in 1995. Moreover, notice where the Al-Qaeda suicide attackers are not coming from. Iran. Surely an Islamic fundamentalist population, 3 times the population size of Saudi Arabia. No Al-Qaeda suicide attackers. Sudan. Sudan is an Islamic fundamentalist country, about the same population size as Saudi Arabia, and with a brand of Islamic fundamentalism so congenial to Osama, he chose to live there for 3 years in the 1990s. No Al-Qaeda suicide attackers. Bangladesh, one of the largest Islamic fundamentalist populations on the planet, over 110 million people, and no al-Qaeda suicide attackers. What we're seeing is powerful evidence that the main cause of suicide terrorism is foreign occupation. So, no 72 virgins. Hardly any discussion of Islam as a religion. So what is it about occupation that triggers the suicide attackers, secular and religious? Well, it's not one thing that an occupation does. Occupations can do multiple things. First, occupations can produce atrocities. That, of course, can produce revenge. Occupations can also create the environment in which people can become heroes for their community by throwing off the occupation. Occupations can also encourage people to become religious, even more religious, perhaps as a way to deal with this newfound environment suddenly oppressing them. And why the occupation in general is because when there are foreign ground forces on territory overseas, especially from a powerful country like the United States, local communities often believe, not always, but often believe they've lost control of their government. And what we see is if there's more occupation, we get more suicide terrorism. You see, since 2004, there have been over 1,800 suicide attacks around the world, many times more than from 1980 to 2003. And notice where they are. They're not scattered around the world as they would be if they were merely the product of religious fanaticism or any ideology independent of a circumstance. They're concentrated. They're concentrated tightly around occupations.